Okay, cool. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Defender for Endpoint breakout session. We're so happy to have you join us today, and we will know that this has been a very long week. We have a lot of content that we covered for you. We hope that you will still be excited with the announcements that we're going to make today. So let's dive in. My name is Dana, and I'm the Group Product Manager for Defender for Endpoint. And I have Kim here with me, that even though if you look at the photos, we look alike, we're not the same person. And we're going to present with you today. So Kim.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm Kim. I lead the marketing efforts across our Defender suite. And with that, we're going to get started. So today, we want to talk to you about three things when it comes to the innovation that we're doing for endpoint security. One, how do you protect your entire device estate? Then we'll talk a little bit about custom data collection. And then Dana will come back on stage and talk to you about what we're doing around autonomous protection. So fundamentally, when we decide on what to build next, there are two key concepts of how we make those decisions on our strategy. One is, what are we seeing in the threat landscape, and how can we help our customers protect against the latest techniques, the latest campaigns that we're seeing? And then the second key concept is customer listening. What are you telling us that you fundamentally need to better protect your device estate? And so what comes up there is one, legacy systems. No matter how many times we're going to tell you, upgrade to Windows 11. It's the most secure operating system that you can be on. It's the same thing as when we say move all of your AD accounts to be cloud identity only. All of those things are true, but at the same time, we know that doing that is complex, it takes a lot of time, it's expensive, and for some devices, it's just not possible. Then there's visibility. Now, endpoint protection solutions, no matter which one you have, are designed to optimize for detection and response. And so the data we collect is really optimized for us to have a high fidelity in our detections, but also respond fast. While customers want all of the data they can possibly get for hunting, for auditing reasons, or compliance reasons. And so sometimes they're at odds. And then lastly, because we have to say AI at this conference within the first 5 minutes of every presentation, AI is impacting the threat landscape. Ransomware campaigns, the way they're built, the way they're executed, and defenders don't really feel equipped to defend against them. And so I'm going to start us off talking about how we are going to protect your entire device estate or help you do that more effectively, and then also how you can collect all of the data that you want. So protecting all of the devices in your organization can be complex, and adversaries know that, and they exploit those gaps and know that it's challenging for you to do it. Just to give you some stats that we see, nearly 100% of attacks involve servers when it comes to endpoint-based attacks. And it's obvious why an adversary would be interested in them, because they hold a lot of data, they run some of your corporate systems, but at the same time what we see is that they're actually not being as effectively protected as end-user devices. They're sometimes managed by a different team, or for other reasons, but end-user devices are actually more or better protected than servers. Then quick show of hands. Who in this room, at least for their Windows estate, is only on Windows 10 or 11? OK, so you make up the 10%. But what we see is that 90% of large enterprises actually have some form of legacy device in their environment, which means they're out of mainstream support. And then lastly, over 70% of ransomware attacks leverage non-onboarded devices. Adversaries know their targets really well. And most companies don't have the rigor today in onboarding devices to their endpoint protection solutions as soon as they enter the network. And so adversaries exploit those gaps very effectively. OK, so what are we doing about that? So today, I'm super excited to announce that we're expanding the support for Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2 with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to keep your legacy systems better protected. Now, what does expanded mean? It's now, for one, natively delivered with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and we've expanded the capability set so that the features are actually consistent that Defender delivers across all of our systems. Even automatic attack disruption, which contains in-progress attacks, can now act on these older devices, which is a really big deal when it comes to ransomware. Now, for those of you who don't know what attack disruption is just yet, Dana will go into that in a lot more detail later. And I know that legacy coverage doesn't necessarily scream innovation, but it's part of our commitment to meeting customers where they're at. So this is the complete list of the operating systems that we support today with Microsoft Defender, all natively delivered and consistent capability sets across them. And so while older systems are never going to be as secure as the latest operating system, even with your endpoint protection solution, we're going to continue to expand our legacy coverage moving forward because we know that's just what customers are asking for. OK, so now we have all this support with Defender for Endpoint, but how do I get Defender onto these devices in the first place? A minute ago, I shared with you that 70% of ransomware attacks leverage non-onboarded devices. So they exist in your network, but they're not actually protected. And that's so complex because onboarding a diverse OS estate is really hard. Each device type has different requirements. Yeah. So today, I'm super excited to announce the Defender deployment tool. It gives you a unified and streamlined way to deploy all of your Windows and Linux devices, and it's available right in the Microsoft Defender portal. So the best part about it is that it downloads a single package, and the tool will dynamically adapt. So what does that mean? It identifies the underlying operating system. It then takes care of all of the prerequisites that you have and installs Defender for Endpoint on them. It also has several controls built in that allow you to test for issues before onboarding, but it can also accommodate complex scenarios like virtual desktop infrastructure. Now, I do want to be clear. This does not replace Microsoft Intune, but it solves for two key scenarios. So for organizations who either don't have solutions like Microsoft Intune or System Center Configuration Manager, it gives you a single way to deploy across your entire estate. Now, if you do have Microsoft Intune, but you have a lot of legacy systems, except the 10% who raised their hand earlier, then the legacy systems are typically not supported by these solutions. And so instead of having to need third-party tooling to get Defender or other protections onto all of these legacy systems, you can now do that with a single tool right within the Microsoft Defender portal and in a much more streamlined way. So let's take a look of where you can find that. Here, I'm in the Microsoft Defender portal under Settings and then Endpoint, which now you can see here. Let me actually go back. This is the new Defender deployment tool, which is in public preview, starting with Ignite, where you can find the package. And when you start executing that on a device, so here we have a Windows 7 machine indicated by the beautiful taskbar that you can see at the bottom here. I'm quickly going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. So here you can kind of see all of the configuration options, pre-check, which just helps you check for the prerequisites and identify everything that you need essentially for this particular device. You also have a set of onboarding options and then advanced deployment options. And so I started by running the pre-check essentially, and then what Microsoft Defender does automatically is it identifies that it's Windows 7 Service Pack 1, which build number it's on, and then, going back here, automatically starts downloading the right package for Microsoft Defender. So if you remember before, you had to know, you had to select, and basically make sure that the right version was installed. And so with the Defender deployment tool, it's just taking care of it for you. Now, this is very unexciting, but just to give you a sense of what the onboarding process looks like, once you actually then start the onboarding process, the tool starts running. You get a beautiful progress screen, and then it's just done. And so while we believe that this is going to make a huge difference in your ability to actually ensure coverage across your entire estate, that's why we're doing it. And so hopefully you're as excited as we are about that, because it's all about ease of use and making sure that you can cover your entire estate. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about data collection. Defender today provides over 200 out-of-the-box raw data types that are each enriched with numerous properties accessible through the advanced hunting experience. But we also know that each organization and each SOC has different levels of granularity that they're looking for. So quick show of hands again in this room, who today has more than 2 tools to complete the optics for the endpoint solution and analyze additional data that you need? OK, that's a few of you. And so some of those tools include Sysmon, Tanium, AMA, and you've had to deploy them, manage them, configure them in addition to Microsoft Defender. Luckily, you don't have to do that anymore now, because we're introducing custom data collection right within Microsoft Defender. And with this feature, we're doing a couple of things. We're releasing several new data types that can be collected. For example, the highly requested 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝐶 for hunting over script content, and 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝗏 for hunting auth-based and network attacks. And so now you can really decide what's all that additional data that doesn't come out of the box that we're collecting that you need. And the cool thing is that Microsoft Sentinel is how you ingest that data, but you're never leaving the Defender portal. And you can automatically then hunt across all of that data because it just shows up once you decide that that's what you want to collect. The second thing is it's also automatically correlated with all of the other data that you have in Defender, not just endpoint, identity, apps, whatever you have connected in the Defender portal gets correlated, creating even higher fidelity incidents for you to identify. And so let's take a quick look at what custom data collection looks like, or how you can start configuring that today. OK, so here we're again back in the Defender portal, back in the same settings experience. And we now have added under rules a new tab that's called custom data collection. And so here you can essentially see either existing rules. Obviously, you wouldn't have any existing ones. What you have to do is select a Sentinel workspace if you have one, or otherwise create one beforehand, which lives in the Defender portal as well. And for here, we're just going to I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to create a net new custom data collection rule. So you enter your name, you enter a description for this particular rule, and then you can test it or enable it right from the get-go with the, I'm just going to quickly use the laser pointer right here. And then we make it super easy for you to actually decide what is that data that I want to collect through this particular rule. So we have several tables that you can kind of drag and drop from, and then also select a particular action type, which then shows up in the rule conditions. I'm just going to quickly zoom in. So here, initiating process file name, such as contoso.exe. And so here you can really create all of your own rule conditions of the data that you now want to collect that matters to you. Oop. Give me 1 second. All right. And then you define the rule scope. Are there specific device tags, devices that you want to include in this rule? Or do you want to make it super easy, which means all applicable client devices should be included in the collection for this particular rule? And so once you've made that decision, pretty easy. You get an overview of everything that you've defined. Again, the rule name description, the involved tables, and the device targeting that we just walked through. And then you just hit submit, and the data starts collecting. Now, switching from there, how does it actually show up? Obviously, then you would be able to use all of the data that you're now collecting in the advanced hunting experience, like I explained earlier. So here we're in the advanced hunting experience. Now, here at the top, you can see that I have, and let me quickly use my laser pointer again, the Sentinel workspace, Microsoft Sentinel workspace that I've selected, where this data is essentially being collected and coming from in the Defender portal. And then you can run your queries against all of that data and make sure that all of the custom data that you're now collecting is available to you for you to hunt for. So, of course, making endpoint protection more efficient and customizable is part of our mission for security teams. It's just what customers are asking for, and this is part of our customer listening effort that I talked about earlier. But when we look at the dynamics of today's threat landscape, that's where it becomes interesting. We've talked a lot about AI, autonomous protection at this conference, and also in our endpoint security, we're heavily invested in those exact defenses. And so now I'd like to turn over to Dana, who's going to show you some of the most exciting news that we have around protection.
So thank you, Kim. So let's move into what we mean when we say autonomous protection. And when we're saying autonomous, what we're talking about is the security that doesn't just alert. It goes and it acts. It's always on, always ready, and is able to save you from attacks that are running real time in your environment. So about 2 years ago, we were on this stage, or a similar one, and announced attack disruption, where we started fundamentally changing the game for defenders. So just to remind you what attack disruption is. Attack disruption is defenders' ability to contain compromised assets automatically during an attack as soon as the attack emerges in your environment. And we do that autonomously, completely, on by default for all our customers. We're doing so by leveraging AI and leveraging our global intelligence in order to shut down live threats. And the results that we've seen thus far has been nothing short of transformative. And the numbers that you'll see on the next slide that I will show you just show you how far we've come. So in just the last 6 months, automatic attack disruption was able to save over 450,000 users and 270,000 devices from active attacks. And those are not just numbers. They're not theoretical. Those are real people and real endpoints that are protected in real time using Defender. But and today, also, when we upscaled attack disruption, we maintained and continue maintaining the highest bar that we put for ourselves, which means that we are disrupting ransomware attacks in under 3 minutes across your entire environment. So even as we scale, we don't lower the bar, and we don't allow ourselves to operate autonomously without meeting the highest fidelity bar and doing that at the right speed to actually be effective. But it's not just about numbers, right? It's about you, our customers, that we are here to protect. So our true impact that we see from our customers is when we get the customer feedback that starts like, wow, thank you, Defender saved the day for us. Or something with, well, I can't even begin to imagine the damage that I would have dealt with if the attack disruption wouldn't have been operational in my environment. So this is where we are here to protect your business continuity. But another pleasure that we have, and also happens on a regular basis, is that we get red teams really, really irritated. We get customer calls that don't just ask for, I want this feature, or I have an issue with the product, or I want to hear about our roadmap. They're also asking us, my red team can't work in the environment when attack disruption is on. How do I disable it? And usually our response is, well, you have a way to disable it, but, well, that just means that it works. So don't detour. Don't do that. Challenge your red teams to find a way for holding their security posture when your entire security stack is up and running and saved in place. But we are far from being done. And we can't just be satisfied and say, well, we've created very significant protection impact, and we can move on to the next challenge. Because in 80% of advanced attacks, they're not single-waved. They are multi-stage persistent campaigns that are running from sophisticated actors in your environment. And that means that defenders at this point, they don't just have to be fast and accurate once. They have to do that at every turn that they take. So let's look at this timeline that you see here. This is just a typical ransomware attack that we see from the Cactus group. So you can see privilege escalation, you can see malicious RDP, you can see remote operations, and you can see GPO tampering. And the interesting fact is not just all of it happens in the same attack, but each one of those steps was executed using a different identity that was held by the attacker. So that means that at this point, even if you were able, or we were able to automatically for you, to contain or disable that compromised first user, that wouldn't have been successful enough to actually save your environment. So we know now that attackers, they don't stop at they're blocked. They pivot, they retool, and they strike again. And this is why the old approach that we have with security tools of being reactive, even automatically, and responding after each move of the attacker simply isn't enough anymore. So today, we are announcing the next breakthrough that should help you with these kinds of attacks, which is predictive shielding. And this is where our defenses get truly proactive. We're anticipating the attacker's next move before they start acting in the environment. So what does that mean? It starts with the first signal of compromise. Defender reaches that 99% confidence and kicks off attack disruption. But at this point, as we said, we're not stopping with containment. And this is where predictive shielding takes over. Before the attacker can pivot, Defender leverages our knowledge of your organization and your graph and the attack techniques that we know that the attacker is using, and we start anticipating the next move. We predict the most likely attack paths, we map the blast radius that is potential in your environment, and we pinpoint those critical assets that are at risk. But then that's not enough, because there are many of them. And then we start narrowing those thousands of possible pathways to just the right ones that we know the attacker will get to. So this is the power of connecting our pre-breach intelligence based on the graph with post-breach actions. But we don't stop there. We could have stopped there. That will be innovative as well, right? Just raising a prediction alert saying there is something going to happen in your environment. But we don't do that because that will be way too late for your team to engage and react. And this is where we turn those insights into action and we start shielding. So predictive shielding activates a unique set of controls that we tailor-made for specific attack scenarios in the context of the threat intelligence that we already have. And those are the ones that will be effective to stop the progression of the attack in your organization and block the damage. What sets predictive shielding apart is the fact that it works just in time. This is the time for enforcement. Defender uses this high-fidelity signal that we said 99% of confidence, and we block the attack path during the attack itself. So we're preventing the critical harm while we're still maintaining your organization healthy, and we try to avoid as much friction to your organization as possible. And this is what proactive defense means. So many solutions offer pre-breach hardening, and Defender does too. And many other solutions may offer impressive and comprehensive detection coverage. Defender does as well. But Defender is the only solution that integrates both into autonomous protection that creates real impact in real time in the sophisticated attacks that we have today. So before you go into the demo, and I promise you that it comes soon, I want to talk about how can we deliver this protection that no one else can. And this comes down to the things that only Microsoft can bring to the table. First, and this is the first layer, is that we hold the world's broadest threat intelligence. So we process over 100 trillion daily signals, and that makes us being able to spot new attack techniques as soon as they emerge. But our intelligence doesn't end with the feed, because we don't just share with you new TI. We take that and we ingest it into our engine, and now we're able to create that and translate it into proactive defense. The second layer is our unique ability to the graph. Well, I'm sure you've heard the word graph many times over the past few days. And it's true, because only Microsoft sees the entire map. So we see the users, we see the devices, we see the data, and we know how they all connect in your environment. And that lets us predict where the attacker will pivot and cut lateral movement even before it happens. And third, this is the real-time attack analysis. So we don't just collect the logs, we analyze the attack as it unfolds in the environment, and we adapt the system and our logic as much as we see more and more alerts occurring. So every attack makes us smarter and faster and more prepared to protect the next organization that we see. And last, on top of all of it, is the fact that when we operate and we start acting, we're not using off-the-shelf controls. We're using the tailor-made hardening that is built into the OS. So we're not using the controls that you regularly use or just configurations that we can activate in the environment. Our top engineers created unique hardening capabilities that are integrated into Windows so that we can surgically block the attack before it starts. At this point, I want to say that predictive shielding isn't a feature. So we're not going to see us just announcing here on this stage, and next year we'll simply have, we will for sure have more cool announcements coming, but you will continue hearing from us about predictive shielding, because this is the truly autonomous defense concept that we will continue investing in, evolving in, creating more controls, more logic, and implementing more AI into our system to being able to continuously protect you from sophisticated attacks. Now, just a sip of water before we start the demo. So now let's take a look at some of the capabilities that we'll be launching today, and I think that you've seen enough slides. So let's start seeing that in motion. So our story begins on a weekend when there is an attack in your organization and most of your team is probably off. There is a hands-on keyboard attacker that gained access to your environment, and they start operating there, and they want to maximize the damage that they can. But luckily, you have attack disruption and predictive shielding that autonomously contain the attacker and try to minimize the blast radius. So by the time that your team starts to engage with it, the damage is already contained, and we can now see what's happening. So when we dive here into the incident, we start with playing the attack story. And the first sign of compromise is an anonymous remote connection from an external IP into your domain controller. What you'll see here is the defender immediately detects that the attacker is trying to create a new privileged account in the environment. And within seconds, the first thing that happens is that attack disruption contains the user and blocks it from lateral movement. But, well, we said that's not enough, right? The defender doesn't stop there, and now it's predictive shielding time. So in this case, the prediction starts with the power of the extensive TI that we have. So this kind of attack of account creation is a known persistent technique that we know to associate with the Cactus ransomware group. So Defender recognizes this pattern, automatically correlates it into the deep knowledge that we have about this adversary, and uses it for the prediction model. So you'll see here the Defender predicts that the next typical move of the attacker, of this actor, will be rebooting the devices into safe mode in order to disable the security stack. So you will see that we will raise an alert that reflects the risk along with the context and the reasoning. And in this threat analytics profile that is now on the screen, that is correlated directly to the incident, we share all of the context that we know about the adversary with the full overview of the behaviors that we have. And now we will be able also to deep dive into a specific technique profile that will show up in a second, in which you will be able to learn about what safe mode reboot is and how attackers are using it for tampering purposes. OK, cool. So we're going back to the incident, and now I want to see how predictive shielding uses this knowledge. So first of all, we see that there is a new type of alert from predictive shielding that doesn't just tell us what happened already based on events that happened on the devices, but tells us what's at risk. So now when we open this map, we can see how Defender figured it out. So we use the exposure data to calculate the potential blast radius of the attack. And in other words, that just means what devices the attackers can reach out of from the point in which they're in the system. So Defender determined that the devices that are joined into the domain are the ones that are exposed. OK, so going back to what we talked about before, this is prediction. Again, we can just raise an alert, and then how long will it take for your SOC team to engage? I don't think that there is anyone here who can commit that their SOC team will be able to understand this prediction and act within 3 minutes. I don't think that's an SLA that any human can commit to, OK? And this is where the shielding part starts. So take a look, because this is really the real value of it. Defender already automatically applied multiple hardening controls in your environment, trying to stop the attacker. And all are reflected within the Defender portal. So in this case, when we deep dive, we see that the Defender was able to stop and prevent the devices from booting into safe mode. And it's worth pausing here for a second, because this is, again, not something that we just, an available capability that we just integrated with. These are the things that we created one of a kind because we understand what the attackers are doing and what it takes to stop them. In this case, just in time of the attack, and again within less than 3 minutes, and another point to it is that it doesn't require any prerequisites in your environment or any integrations. Defender was able to block the ability for the attacker to get a security stack blind. And another point to it is about the level of friction that we are able to create your organization. We want to minimize that, right? We want your organization to continue operating. So we apply this hardening only to the devices that, according to the graph, we believe are exposed. So now that we've seen which hardening controls were applied, let's go back to the incident and see the actual protection impact that we were able to create. So in the alert timeline, you can see that the prediction was correct. The attacker did, in fact, attempt to boot devices into safe mode, and that all of those attempts were blocked completely by Defender. But, as we said before, attackers will pivot, and that will probably not be the end of the story. And Defender continues tracking the attacker's activity, and predictive shielding works again. This time, the attacker pivots to try and abuse GPO and attempt to tamper with the security stack in just another way. And predictive shielding, again, is one step ahead. And in this case, we're using an innovative enforcement control that we are launching today, which can pause temporarily GPO propagation in your organization. Now, GPO is a core operational mechanism for organizations, and I guess that everyone in this room depends on it on a daily basis, right? So I want to give it to a test in a second. Is there anyone here in this room that believes that their organization would have been willing to stop GPO completely at peacetime and their organization just because you guys as security teams will come there and say that there is a security risk to it? Okay, I could have guessed. I asked this question to many customers, and I've yet to meet a customer that is able to do that on a daily basis. And this is where the power of predictive shielding breaks this paradigm, because we do that only with the highest fidelity of signal of an attack. And at that point, we're doing it just at the time of the attack and just during the attack itself. At this point, when you know that there is a ransomware attack in your organization, you're more likely okay with the fact that security trumps IT and friction, right? And what we're doing here is both precise and surgical. So we're not just applying it just to the devices at risk, as you've seen with the safe boot hardening. We're also only applying it to new GPO policies that are propagated in the environment. And this way, we are able to block the attacker, where we still allow the running policies that were set by your IT team to continue running and to continue propagating. But before we move on, I want to say that the ability to block GPO encapsulates another unique part of predictive shielding, which is the deep OS integration. Because this control is only possible with Microsoft, because we've created that in an innovative way that doesn't require any other tool integration and can work in real time only by having Defender for Endpoint deployed on your estate. So here's the outcome. The attacker attempted broad tampering techniques time after time, trying to blind the security stack. But predictive shielding anticipated their actions and hardened the environment before impact occurred. So eventually, tampering never landed, and Defender remained fully operationalized. Just shortly afterwards, the attacker tried launching the payload, and that was completely blocked immediately, preventing any impact to the environment. So we started my section when I said, let's talk about what autonomous protection is, and this is truly what it's about. But looking at this crowd, while I know that this crowd is excited with being able to protect your organization from sophisticated attacks from today, and the fact that we're doing that in a timely and effective manner, I'm sure that all of you feel a bit uncomfortable as well, moving in your chairs thinking, but am I still in control? Do I still have all the visibility that I need? Or is Defender operating in a way that isn't visible for me, and then I don't know what happened and I can't take further actions? So I want to reassure you that predictive shielding is autonomous, but you're still in the driver's seat. And that all the details, the data, the prediction that was made, the hardening controls that were applied, they're available for your SOC at any time. So they can investigate, they can undo actions if they choose to, and they can take the lead whenever they choose. If you are interested with the things that you've seen up until now, and you want to dive further, we have another session talking strictly about predictive shielding tomorrow and how it meets ransomware. And we will go beyond the basics that we were able to share with you today. We will share some more predictive shielding capabilities. I can tease you that some of those are relating to how attackers pivot between users and credentials, and how do we try to anticipate the way that they do that and block them. And we will also provide you with some practical tools on how to investigate, how to hunt over the data, and how to manage attack disruption as needed. So just before we close, we want to recap the things that we've shared with you today. And we will use a short 2-minute video for that. Cool. So I know that you've been overloaded with information this week and with this session as well. So I just wanted you guys to take one key takeaway here, is that we're committed to continuously evolving Defender to be able to face the world as the world changes. And as the threat landscape changes, we try to adapt. And as the workspace changes, we will have you covered. So thank you for coming today.